Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of the DX Mentor. I'm your host, Bill, AJ8B, and we're going to be discussing DX perspective today. And what I mean by DX perspective is this. Let's say you're into DXing now and you look at the entity list and you see 341 countries. And you start to dig down and realize, well, I can't do 341 countries in the short term. And heck, some of them don't come on until every 8 or 10 years or longer. So how can I attack this? Well, there's an old adage that the way you eat an elephant is one bite at a time, and that's exactly what we're going to show you how to do today. I have several really excellent DX gurus with me today: Joe, W8GEX, Jay, K4ZLE, Tom, NR8Z, and my friend Bert, WB0N. And they're all going to be here to tell you how to attack this thing in layers versus the entire entity list all at once. Before we get started, though, I have an achievement I'd like to mention. My friend Dave, KADV, just received his honor roll plaque from the ARRL DXCC desk in the mail. It is terrific, and it really commemorates the challenge and the great achievement that Dave has done. So hats off to Dave. The club is proud of him. I'm proud of him, and it's great to call him my friend, and he's a true DXer. So congrats, Dave. So let's get started. Let's tune in and hear what these guys have to say. I'd like to have our gurus introduce themselves, and then we'll jump into the topic. So from left to right, I have Joe, W8GEX in Oxford, Ohio. Joe, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, thanks, Bill, and thanks for putting this on this evening. I've been a ham for 53 years, pretty much a DXer, been on a few DXpeditions, but just really love ham radio. Been active ever since I got licensed. And I'm just obsessed with it, as my wife would tell you.
So the first love of your life is Gray Line, and the second is Janet. Is that?
That is correct.
Okay, good. And then we have WB0N, Bert.
Yeah, hi guys. Bert, WB0N. I've been licensed since the 70s, but I was stuck with a Tech Plus for until they got rid of, until they knocked the code thing down. And then the extra was easy. And so I just started out just doing sideband only. And even after I got my extra, I was sideband only. And that was my first DXCC I got was just sideband. And the guy that checked my card said, "Huh, you're not a real ham if you don't do CW." So then I got into CW by the ARRL sweepstakes. How's that for entering CW? Wow. That was my first CW cues in my life. And then from there, I went to RIDI and digital and blah, blah, blah. So now I got a DXCC in all of them. And CW and digital have more DXCCs than phone now.
So how supportive, right? You think you've had a great accomplishment, and the guy says, "Well, you're not really a ham."
Yeah. I was at the Twin City DX meeting, Twin City DXA meeting. You're not really. And then the guys, and I'm also a member of the Minnesota Wireless Association Contest Club, and they were telling me too, "Hey, you only do part of the contest. What's up with that?" So there we go. I always had trouble with CW, but I found that my call at 30 words a minute is just like a little musical note. If you send me my call at 13 words a minute, I say, "Huh? What is it?" So I can't get on there and rag chew with you on CW, but I can sure work you at 30, 40 words a minute on CW in a contest or a DXpedition.
Well, that's what you need. So, well, good for you. I have Tom, NR8Z.
Thanks, Bill, for setting this up. I was first licensed in 1975 while I was in high school, and I didn't work any DX until I got to college, and there was a 2-element tri-bander on the science building, and a couple of other students had brought some rigs in, and I got a chance to see what DXing was like, and I haven't looked back since then. DXing certainly my first love. I actually live now in a HOA neighborhood, and I'm stuck with a vertical, but I just worked number 300. So it is possible to do that.
Good. Congratulations.
Congratulations. Good for
Thanks.
Congratulations.
Jay, K4ZLE.
Hello, Bill. Hello, everyone else. Well, let's see. I've been licensed since 1958. The call I have now is a version of the first one I had. Of course, it was KN4ZLE. I was a 20 word a minute novice. I've been active ever since. I've gotten licensed back in 58. Didn't start DXing though until I graduated from the academy and ended up in Pensacola and started working DX there in about 1967, 68. Been at it ever since. I have all of them, but the P5, but I did work P5 RS7, so I kind of count that one for you all that remember Romeo. And I've operated from probably about 60 DXCC entities, and I guess that's about it for me.
All right. Well, I've been chasing DX for about 30 years. But what helped me was when I first was encouraged to join SWDEXA by W9SWM, who I met at all places at DARA meeting. And Larry said, you got to find a club. So I did. And not long after that, I always had the opinion, it's too much. It's 350 countries. It's way too much. It's, I'm either college or I have a young family. I can't buy all those things. And then I read an article from Jay, K4ZLE, about keeping your perspective. And his article basically was analogous to you've inherited this garden, and I'm taking poetic license with his article, but you got to get all the weeds out. So your first pass is to go through the weeds and get the really easy ones, right? So that's your first 100. Well, the second pass through, you're going to have to learn a little about horticulture, and now you made your second pass through and you're doing a better job. So there's your next 100 or so. But boy, that final 100, is it a vegetable? Is it a flower? Is it a weed? So it takes, a much sharper eye, a lot of education, and that always stuck with me. So several years ago at SEDCO, I did a presentation on DXCC one bite at a time, and it was all based on Jay's article, and that's kind of the approach I want to take tonight. So, I would never, if I had a friend that got into DX, never tell them how they need to work, 340 in the next couple of years. Let's just go a few at a time. Let's go a few at a time. It's the old adage, right? How do you eat an elephant? Well, you eat it a bite at a time. And to me, that's always been DXCC. So I'll start off with Jay. Jay, if you were going to start fresh today, based on your knowledge and stuff, and your goal is that first 100 or so, what would be your approach?
That's a good question, Bill, because it's so long ago since I worked the first 100. But the way I went about it then, of course, it's not necessarily the right way, but the way I would probably go about it, well, let's say the way I'd go about it today would be I'd get on there, start listening. First thing I'd probably do is see about joining a DX club, finding a mentor, somebody local who knows something about it. Listen, and my first pass would probably be just tuning around here in the DX, learning how they, or what part of the band they're in. Because I remember when I started, the guy that lived close to me, I didn't realize there was DX some 40 meters. And of course, I was working CW. He said, well, turn down the low end of the band and listen. And of course, I did. And that's how I got started really working the lower band DX. So I just listen around, find out what's going on. And probably the first 100 is going to be pretty casual, but I might start working a few contests.
Okay, Bert, what do you think?
Yeah, I kind of agree. Join a club where like the guys at the Twin City DX Association helped me a lot. Like I said, when I joined in 2002, I didn't have a DXCC. I didn't have nothing, and now I got 8-band DXCC. Anyway, I would start like that too. And DX, get on in DX contests are a DX smorgasbord. So if you join the local contest group too, they'll help you in how to work contests so you can get all these. That's where I got a whole lot of my whole lot of my countries and stuff came from contesting. To begin with, I started out, I loved DX more than anything else. So I started out, when a contest was on, I'd go work, say 1 JA, and I'd work one from England, and okay, I'm done. But if you just keep going, why they pop up out of the woodwork. It's like last year, I'm not really that high on the DXCC list, but last year I worked 177 DXCCs. And it also, the other thing is modes, get into all modes. A lot of people don't like FT8, but when you don't have any antennas, like I don't have any antennas really. I just got, hunks of wire here and there, and they're not even up high. And then vertical, talk about vertical. Anyway, so yeah, you get on and get on there and, CW and sideband is the hardest band to work DX for me now because I have lousy antennas.
Okay, Tom, any thoughts on that?
I would certainly echo the idea of getting into contests. The other thing I would suggest, most of the big contest stations will a QSL via Logbook of the World. So it's really easy to confirm that way. Just upload your contest log. And then the other thing about a contest, usually all the bands are active. You're going to learn about propagation that way and how your station works around the world. And you can't go wrong with PSK Reporter as well. If you're on CW or FT8, you can see how your signal's getting out and learn about propagation that way. I guess these days I would say get on FT8 as well. You can hone your skills in FT8 domestically, and then you got a chance, the computer's helping you. You can get into the fray and work the stations with FT8. The other thing I would suggest, because I know I have a few misses over the years that I regret, is go ahead and go after the hard to work ones if they show up. Right now, Bouvet is going to be on, and even if you're working on your first 100, when they're on the air, give them a shot, because if you make even one band mode contact with them, you'll have Bouvet and you won't have to worry about it for the next decade or two.
Yeah. All right, Joe?
Well, I sort of echo what the guys have been talking about. Join the club. I agree. That's very, very important to have the other fellowship with the guys and girls. Contesting is always a lot of fun and excellent experience, no matter which contest you're in. And excuse me for one, I had a good friend that I chummed around with. He was a seasoned ham operator, and I think that's important because we all run into these problems and these little issues, and who do we turn to? You can't turn to your wife or your spouse in any case because they don't know. So it really helped me when I had this friend that I could turn to. And I'm a big FT8 guy now, so I really, really like it. But you can work a lot of people, a lot of countries in a short period of time. And I really enjoy W3UR's Daily DX. His bulletin is just a tremendous amount of information because I'm still looking for countries, and I make little post-it notes when Beauvais going to be on and what their schedule is and so forth. So all that's what's really helped me, Bill.
We had a podcast, I guess the first one, we had K0MD on, Scott Wright, and Scott had a couple really good points. His first couple of contests, if he could make 100 QSOs, he felt like he was successful. And now if he's serious about a contest, he likes to try to get DXCC on 3 bands. So the difference between that entry level and then what you can try to achieve years later is great. The other point he made was, and I could relate to this one, the 2 contests that he's really interested in that help him the most are the ARL contests, because you are the quarry that everyone else is hunting. So it's a little bit easier for everyone in the world to call you. And then I particularly like the WPX contest because there's not a lot of AJ8s out there. So that seems to help it a little bit. But in any event, so we've all kind of said that. I'm sorry?
Let me add something else that I
Please.
just thought of. That we mentioned learning propagation and all that, but another way, if you can't find a mentor or a club nearby, look for Contest University or DX University and try to attend one of those. You'll learn a whole lot there. And then another thing, we mentioned Bernie's newsletter, but how about Bob Loker and AC8D stuff, books on DXing? Lokers was a big help to me on some of the things he did early on. Of course, some of it doesn't apply anymore, but still read those books. I've even got W9 WMV with Don Miller's book down there in my library. So, it's worth reading everybody's opinions.
Yes.
I'm making some notes. I'll add those in the show notes. In fact, I read Bob A Year of DX, I think it is, right? And I read his about every 3 years, I'll bet. Just in it, and it's so well written, it gets that enthusiasm going again, where you want to roll your sleeves up. The other one is, I have it behind me, but it's the AC6V, I think, right? That's his book. And it's really good. It has a whole bunch of information in it. So reading in clubs and contests, UNDXU are all kinds of good things. So let me, I'll start again, kind of mixing it up a little bit. Bert, what about, I want to get into this and I'm kind of hearing that, okay, I can get my first 100. I don't have to, mortgage the house, but what should I be looking for as far as a basic antenna and a basic rig for this first tier of equipment?
Well, this friend of mine, he's a silent key now, but KG0DK Ray gave me an important, very important thing to remember always. Any antenna beats no antenna. That is my philosophy to this day. I have 2 verticals and I have inverted B with the apex at about 20 feet, a 4-band one. And I have an off center fed, which is wrapped around a tree part of it, and the other end just drops straight down to the ground. So any antenna really, so you get out there and try it, it's amazing what you can do. So you don't really, I have no tri-bander, I have no tower, I have no dipole 80 feet in the air. So the DX always comes a little bit later than it does for the big dogs around here. And it leaves a little bit earlier, but eventually it always filters down to me. And if I can hear them, I can work them.
Okay, great. Tom, you have any thoughts?
Yeah, one of the things that, in fact, I think I had a conversation with Jay early on, and he was helpful when I lived in the same town as he did. You'd like to get low angle radiation. And so my first antenna was a vertical because I was on a lot with no trees. I wasn't going to be able to get anything up very high. So I went with the vertical. And now I'm actually still using a vertical because I'm in an HOA neighborhood, but I do have a really large tree out behind my house. So I have a dipole up in that tree. And that helps a lot. I have 2 options that way. But I agree with Bert. Any antenna is better than no antenna. You can work DX and just try and shoot for something that gives you low angle radiation. You can do an inverted L. There's a guy around the corner from me who has an inverted L out there, and between the vertical part of that and the horizontal part, he probably gets out pretty well.
Okay, Jay or Joe, any?
Yes. Excuse me. I would suggest get a good radio. Not necessarily a brand new one because you may not be able to afford it, but I would get a decent radio because if you don't, it could end up like an old car, just nickel dime you to death. So I always suggest a good radio, but the most important part of the whole system is what the guys have already discussed, and that's the antenna. And I'm like Tom and Bert, both of those guys. I've got a bunch of verticals out back. So, and I've got 2 towers and beams in that, but I like my verticals, Bill.
Okay. Jay, I'll see if you have any thoughts, and then I'm going to switch on you a little bit. You had mentioned one time at a club meeting how important it is to really know your radio. So I'll let you answer that, and if you want to switch and give me your thoughts on that, it'd be great.
Well, it's interesting you say that, Bill, because I had that down as a note here. As we're talking about the first 100, what somebody should do. I agree with Joe. Get you a good radio. Make sure it has dual VFOs so you can split. Learn the capabilities of that radio so that you can really take advantage of it. But back to the other things, a dipole will work, especially with the sunspots where they are now, up on the upper bands, upper frequencies. But as others have said, if you got to go for that low angle radiation on, if you're going to try a 160, I wouldn't worry about it as the first 100. But certainly on 80, 40, and 30 meters, get that vertical up there if you can't get a dipole up high enough. So back to the radios. I don't think I have a whole lot more to say on that, but you really need to understand your radio. Make sure you've got filters in there that, and you understand when to switch what filter in. I used to think the narrower the filter, the better on CW, and I've come to change my mind on that. You've got to learn how to use the equipment and the capabilities of the radios that you have. That's about all I have there on that, Bill.
One of you guys taught me that sometimes the RF gain is a much better filter than actual filters are. So let's make a note of that. We'll maybe get back around that when we get to the next tier. Bert, any thoughts on the radio and maybe some of the features you're going to want in that first 100?
Yeah, radios, like you said, you got to have a decent radio. Like I got the ones I got aren't the current models, but I got a couple Icom, the Icom 7600, which I find really easy to use. And then I have a wounded Icom Pro 3. It puts out full power on 6, 10, 12, 15, and 17 meters. On 30 meters, it puts out 2 watts on FT8. And I've worked on a hunk of wire. I've worked Australia with that 2 watts on FT8 on 30 meters. So it's wounded, but it's my backup radio, my second radio.
Isn't it crazy to think that actually works? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
2 watts to.
Yeah, 2 watts and an on-tuned antenna. The SWR is about 3.5 to 1. Just an on-tuned hunk of wire. Calling CQ, you never can tell who's going to answer you.
I can remember early on as a kid when my father, we had a 75 watt light, incandescent bulb, and that's what I would tune this old ICO with. And his whole reason for doing that was to really give me a very visible, here's how much power you're running. It's not that much, and here's what it is, and yet it still works. So that was always interesting. Tom?
Yeah, when you speak about power, I was actually on the East Coast, but I was doing a Parks on the Air with 5 watts and a buddy pole, and I had about 10 DX contacts out of Europe. So it isn't the power, it isn't the antenna. It's just being at the right place at the right time. I think the part of the radio that's the most important to me is the receiver and the ability to, do band pass, shift the band pass, or if you don't have stacked beams, the DX is not going to be loud. And so the domestic stations, especially here in the Midwest, the domestic stations are going to be loud. Whatever you can do to focus in, a narrower filter, move the band pass, whatever. That's the part of the radio that will make a difference. It's not on the transmit side. It's really on the receive side. If you can't hear the DX and giving back your call sign, you're not going to get through.
Okay. So let's say we've gone through, we've pulled all the weeds. So we got our first 125, and we're talking about, Germany and Brazil and Colombia and, all those great countries that are out there, but there's a lot of hams there and they're fairly easy to work. So now we'll move into the middle tier, like 126 to 240. So we're within 100 of the top now in that middle tier. And yeah, you're going to pick up some of those just by being on the air and stuff, but some of it's going to be a little more difficult. So Joe, what's that next tier now you got to pay attention to be better at getting the next group?
Well, it's like a club member of ours told me years ago, Wayne, he said, if you can't hear them, you can't work them. So I've always been big in order to get into that next tier and start hearing some of the harder ones. You might need a better antenna system. I think 100 watts is pretty much 100 watts, but it's in that receiver and in the antenna system. And to go along with that, I'm a gray line guy. I get up early in the morning, and if we're not out for dinner at night, I'm always in here on the gray line, trying to get that extra enhancement, to work that good DX. So those are the little tricks that I pull off, Bill.
All right, Tom, what do you think? And you can include modes and tactics and anything else you want to throw in there.
Sure. I think Joe hit on one thing talking about the gray line. You're going to have to start being on the air when the DX is, not when you have a few minutes to go sit down in the chair. That was a big thing for me, is being on at different times. I'm not an early riser. And so catching that early gray line made all the difference. You could look at my early count, and I had Europe covered, but I didn't have very much in Asia because I wasn't very good at getting up early. So I would do that. FT8 has made a huge difference to little pistol stations like myself. You can work a lot, especially get up in the morning and Asia is coming in. You can work a lot of countries that way, and that'll get you to the 240, I think. And certainly CW helps as well. If you don't have a very loud station, as Bert said, I go to sideband, at the end of the expedition or the end of the contest. I'll do CW and FT8 when the going gets tough.
Okay, Jay?
Well, if we're moving into the second tier, Bill, I would think it's time to start thinking about a better antenna, which you can do to improve the antenna system you have. You may not need to get that tri-band beam or that big beam yet, but at least start thinking about how you can improve the antenna you have. That would be one step. The next thing is I'm back to split. I really hammer on split. Learn how to operate split. Learn, I think it was Tom said, you've got to be there where they are listening. So you've got to learn how to operate that way. If you don't have dual receivers, you've got to be pretty good at switching back and forth between the A and the B VFO and know which one you're transmitting on. I know we've all been guilty of transmitting on the wrong frequency. And you start learning propagation a little bit better, as we've already mentioned, gray line. How do you use gray line? Understand that it's not the same all year round, and why. You're going to hit different areas of the world at different times of the year. It's important to learn that kind of thing. And then now you're going to start also learning, and some of you may have learned in DX University or Contest University, but you're going to have to start learning some techniques, like not calling exactly as soon as he says over. If he's split, maybe pause it a little bit. Learn what he's doing. This is back to listen, listen, listen. But is he going up a little bit? Is he staying on the same frequency for 3 Qs? Is he going down? Does he go to the top and then drop to the bottom? Does he go to the top and start sliding back down to the bottom? Start learning some techniques, and there's a lot more I think you're going to learn for technique. You're going to have to learn for the top tier, for the level 3 tier. That's my 2 cents.
Okay, Bert?
Yeah, I agree. Learn the gray line. It's like I got to get up every morning at 4:30 and take my daughter to work because the bus don't run. So even if I'm retired, I'm up at 4:30 every morning. But I come back, I check on I Love Club Log. If you upload all your logs to Club Log, they have a DX cluster in there that's just for you. And it'll tell me what band people are on that I need, for different band modes, or it'll just tell me plain old what ones are on there, brand new, period. So yes, using tools like that. And like I said, getting up early, and I don't do a lot of cues, a lot of mornings. I go back to bed if I see nothing spotted that looks decent, and I check the bands, and all I see is the garden variety stuff. Why I take a nap and wait till I can get on 10 meters and 12 meters and have some real fun.
I thought all you Minnesota guys had me convinced that there's no DX that comes into Minnesota and you're all starving up there.
Well, yeah, we are the black hole.
Yeah, that's what they called it, the black hole of DX.
Hole. Especially if you don't have no antenna. If you got antennas like K0MD, he ain't in no black hole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will admit, so for about 2 years, I had a rig in the car, and I have a 2-hour round trip commute, and it gave me a lot of time to listen. And I was shocked how little listening stations do when they're trying to work somebody, and this is not like a snarky comment. I mean, I'm just being sincere. I listen to them, and I'll also hear guys do things like, they can't even, they'll call and call and call and call and call. And the guy will finally come back to him and they'll say, now, what's your call again? It's like, wait a minute.
Yes.
And how did you, so that kind of stuff, the more I would listen, I learned so much, but it would really frustrate me to death. But I did pick up things just by listening, kind of what Jay said. It's like, I'm finding out that this guy will let the entire rush come in. And then if you just throw your call in there,
Yep.
I won't say they're easy to get, but I did DXCC from my car. So I know it can be done. And a lot of that I had to do the hard way, but.
Yeah, the other thing I do is go back to our earlier comments. Hopefully by now you've got a DX mentor besides this podcast, and touch base with them. I remember I was working on my 5-band DXCC and was a few countries short on 80 meters. And I talked to Dave, KTV, and he said, well, do you have Japan yet? And I said, no. And he said, there's only about 30 days of the year when we have a full dark path to Japan. And it's from early December to early January. And so the next time that came around, I worked Japan easily. I just was in the wrong place at the wrong time.
So staying in this middle tier, let's say, how, especially nowadays, how important is it that you have, and we talked about this earlier, but some sort of online resources as well as logging software? We talked in a previous podcast about how it's beyond me to think that I could I did the 160 meter contest a couple of weekends ago, and I had, say, 250 or 300 QSOs. But even with that small amount, I don't know how to have done dupe sheets. I don't know how I would have done any of that in a contest by hand. I'd have spent so much time worrying about making mistakes. I probably would have worked half as many guys. So I'll start this time with Jay. How important is the logging software and then having something like a DX cluster, or DX Heat, or I can't think, a DX Summit.fi? How important is that stuff?
Well, certainly in the second tier, it's going to play a lot more important and be a lot more important, Bill. To me, you're talking about the contest and trying to hand log and also to dupe. I remember back in the 70s when I would play a little more in the contest than I do now. If I made 300 Qs in a weekend with a hand duping, I thought I was doing something. And my goodness, 300 Qs now is what, a couple hours, 3 hours worth of work. But trying to say, okay, that K0, let's see, I got to run down this column for the Ks and run across here for the zeros. And now I got to run A, B, C, D, Es to find whether I've got him or not. And then, of course, you take that much time to put him in that dupe sheet as well. So having a good logging program, and there's so many of them out there today, but I think at least for me, the two big ones are N3FJP, I think it is.
Right.
But on the DXpedition, I don't think anything beats N1MM Plus. I use that all the time on the DXpeditions. And so you've got that, and it's linked into the packet clusters.
And the gray line.
Yeah, and the gray line. It's just amazing what benefit we have now compared to what we didn't have. Many tools that we have, and
it's
it
free.
makes it so much easier. Yeah, and they're free. You're right.
Okay, Joe, I know you've been a big fan of different logging programs and stuff, and you use a lot of different resources. How much does that impact what you do every day?
Oh my God, that's the key. I use two logging programs, like Jay said, N3FJP and Logger 32, but they pretty much both do the same thing. You can get your packet cluster there, of course, the logging. You can see if the guy or the girl is a dupe contact. So the gray line, I have one monitor. I put my hand up here, but you can't see, but it's up here on my right-hand side. And it is a monitor of the gray line. And I just keep that baby running 24/7. Well, I take it back. I shut it off when I go to bed at night, but the monitor, but it's running in the background. So I really like all these new logging programs, because we can send our contest logs in, and it does everything. We don't have to do all that paperwork that we did 30 years ago.
Do you have your DX Edge handy?
Yes, I
So-
showed Bill this today.
Yeah, Jay, I think you mentioned this one time. Were you looking for it online or something? And I happened to have lunch with Joe today and he pulls this out. You ever seen one of these? I said, this is exactly what Jay asked me about a few months ago.
Right, that's the manual way to figure things out.
Yeah.
And,
I still have mine and I can't get rid of it. There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I don't know, I can't remember what I did this morning, but this thing has to be at least 40 years old. Do you know when they came out with this, Jay?
well, I know that, no, offhand, I don't know, but yours is in color. Mine's black and white, so
Oh.
mine's even older than yours.
Oh,
Yeah,
really?
mine's only in black and white too.
Yeah.
Really?
It
What would
should
you-
be dated on the back, Joe, or on there somewhere.
Would you guys want to bid on this?
I bid on one already. You know,
Joe-
another thing you mentioned, Joe, is the gray line. I'll put a plug in for a ham clock. That's a cheap way to get that display with, you got a little Raspberry Pi or any kind of a Unix machine, I think, Linux machine. Ham clock's a good way to display that. And then you can, gives you all sorts of other information as we were talking about, sunspot numbers, gray line, bearings, time, temperature, weather at your DX location. You got VOA cap that you can sit there and see. You've got propagation at your fingertips with that. It's a great little tool.
Yes.
After you did that club presentation, I built one and it's kind of up over everything here and I keep it on all the time. It's a great tool. So Bert, what are your thoughts on these various resources and logging software?
Well, like I said about N1MM plus, I love that. I used to pay money for WriteLog, but and I thought N1MM, if you get something free, I thought you get what you pay for. But no, I was completely wrong about that. That's a fantastic program. So I also use that for just general DX to log. Like now, if I manage to make it to Beauvais, which is going to be rough with my little station, if I manage to make it to work down, why I'll be logging that on CW or sideband. I'll be logging that on N1MM plus, or hopefully on FT8. I'll be just using the FT8 program, you know.
Right.
And that's the other thing he was talking about, listening. Even on FT8, I tune to a band and I see some spots and somebody there. I tune to the band and I look for them first, and then I see who's trying to work them. And then I try and find a little hole where I can get my transmitter in there and fire away. And if it don't work for a couple tries, why I'll quit transmitting and look and see if somebody popped on my frequency that I can see, you know, so some big station is clobbering me. Anyway, so yeah, that's what a lot of listening and use them tools like Club Log. I fire it up. That's going 24 hours a day almost, showing me all the new spots on any new band mode that I need. Like I'll see one on 12 meters and say, God, I gotta work them. But Club Lock says I haven't, so I get on there and I've seen them on there thousands of times. I'll get on there and work them then because I know I need them. So all that stuff helps.
So Tom, the other thing, a comment on that, but also the one I don't think any of us mentioned is QRZ.com. You know, what a resource. I can remember my friend in Fort Wayne, Frank, would always subscribe to the flying Pegasus, right? So about once a week, I would call him. We'd get on the phone. I'd say, I need these addresses, and he'd give them to me. So this is so much better. So go ahead.
Yeah, actually, I remember when I was much younger, going to a friend's house with my list of call signs that I needed and sitting down for half an hour with his call book. Yeah, I use DX Labs on a daily basis, but when I want something simpler, like I'm out portable or a contest, I use N3 FJP. So there's lots of great stuff out there, and you can tailor. You don't have to use the same one all the time. They'll all talk to each other, and you can pass files back and forth. The other thing we haven't talked about is, well, the part I do like is spots are tailored to me, right? I can see everything I need and I don't have to look at all the other stuff. But we haven't talked about QSLing yet. And, you know, the log books will save you a lot of time QSLing, knowing what you need to QSL. I traded messages the other night with Bill. I still need Pakistan. And I was looking through some old log books, and I had worked the Pakistan station. And according to the little scribbles on the side, this was before computerization, I had sent a card, but I have no idea. Did I send it via the Bureau? Did I send it direct? What did I do? And yeah, there in 1990s, the Pakistan station, I wouldn't still be looking for AP2 if I didn't, if I had gotten a QSL there. So the other thing the software will let you do is make sure you're on top of your QSLing and especially go after the tough ones as soon as you work them. That's the way to do it. And Club Log is a, you know, a huge benefit to that anymore. But you need a way to do QSLing. You can't do it on paper.
Yeah, I did have somebody send me an email from the Ohio Section Journal column. And I guess I had mentioned insurance contacts at one point. And they said, what in the world's an insurance contact? And I said, well, that's something we used to have to do before LOTW if you just weren't sure, you know. And I hate, there were times I kind of felt like I was wasting my time, but every time I listened, I thought, I think he sent AJ8D. I better get this again, or I'm going to be really upset because they're not going to go to Palmyra again for years, or, you know, whatever it was. So I guess that's some of the old day stuff. So before we jump into that tier 3, at what point, or tier 1, at what point do we, and I think maybe Jay alluded to, but at what point do we say, you know, 100 watts is cool, but maybe I need a little more than that, you know? And I guess part of this, and I think I know the answer, but I'm curious where you all stand on, I've got X amount of money. Do I put it into the antenna or do I put it into the amplifier? And I know part of it is, well, what kind of antenna do you have now? I get that, but just in general, Tom, where do I put that next chunk of investment? I'm still in my mid-tier here.
Yeah, I mean, I think you put it in the antenna until you reach a brick wall of some kind. It might be a spouse who doesn't want to see any more aluminum in the air. It might be a homeowners association. It might be your pocketbook. It may be whatever. Maybe you don't have the room to put up that, you know, 163 element beam. So I think when it gets tough to do a better antenna, that's when you should turn to looking at more power, an amplifier of some sort. And don't forget your feed line as well. If along the way you had to make some compromises on your feed line, maybe it's time to upgrade the feed line. That won't probably cost as much as the amplifier. And there's certainly a lot of choices in raising your power. 500 watts is a pretty good place to be. You don't have to be at 1500 watts PEP.
Okay, Jay?
I did an article on this a long time ago. And I think I went counter to what everybody says. When I was growing up, as I said, the gurus like Tom would say antenna. But I took a different approach and looked at it. What's my gain dB per band per dollar, or some combination thereof? And what I came out with is, if I got a decent receiver, I'm going to hear them. Now I want to be heard. So I went to put my money in the amplifier because I'd had a reasonable antenna. Now you mentioned it. It depends on what kind of antenna you already have. But I think if you got, say, a tri-bander at 60 feet or so, or a hex beam at 60 where you can cover the work bands as well, I would go for the amplifier. And again, as Tom said, you don't need 1.5 kW. I don't run that now. I've got a little 1.3 kW Italian amplifier. That's all I need. I mean, if I don't work them, except for the really, really rare stuff, if I don't work it in 3 or 4 calls, I better be looking around and seeing who's working him. It's probably not in my area that's working him. It's probably some other area, and I'll just wait to try to work him. So I go, in general terms, for the amplifier after I've got a decent station versus the antenna.
Okay. So that's not a problem I've ever had if I don't get them in 3 calls. But that's just me. Bert, what do you think?
It's an exaggeration, Bill.
I know.
But it's definitely the antenna, because I mean, well, I'm the case in point. You can't no matter how much power you put out, you're just going to be an alligator if you can't hear them. if your antenna is not capable of hearing them, why, things ain't gonna work. I've got a Clipperton L, so I've got a little amplifier here. I use it probably 1/100th of thousands. I use it very rarely. I use it in DX contests because a lot of the big dogs you're trying to work actually got decent receipt, so I'm going to hear them, and they helps me bust the pile up just a little bit. So in that respect, an amplifier does help. But if I'm going to go call in CQ, every time I call CQ, even if I'm only running 300 watts, I get all these stations coming back to me that I can't copy. So then I'm an alligator. So I think antenna first and then bump up the power.
Okay, Joe?
I like all the above.
You're a politician, Joe.
Of course, you guys, Bert hasn't been out here, but I've got, thank God, a nice little antenna farm. So I really lean heavy towards the antenna, but I'm here looking at 4 amplifiers. So, so I try to hit a happy medium, but I like good resident antennas. I really do. But then if I need the power, I've got it if I need it. What kind of amplifier did you have, Bert, or do you have?
I have a Clipperton L, an old one.
Okay. Yeah.
It's got 4. It's a 4-tuber. Theoretically it's capable of a kilowatt, but on my 110 volt line, and it being in the city here of Bloomington, I'm not going to run it all the way up there. I run at 500 watts max usually.
Sure. I have a ACOM 1000, and then I've got a homebrew 6-meter amp, and then 2 KPA 500s, and I really like those KPA 500s.
So
Nice.
do you use those to drive each other, Joe, or for those?
He's got a combiner on them, Bill, all of them.
They're in parallel, yeah.
I was
Wow.
afraid somebody was going to ask that.
Hey, Bill, let me give you a quick reason for my analysis, since I'm the outlier. You can buy a decent used amplifier for about $1,000. Tell me you can put up a tower and a tribander, get all your permissions. Concrete today is what, $300 a yard or something like that? You're not going to do it for $200 or $1,000.
No.
Yeah. I paid 600 only for my Clipperton, so that's rather cheap.
So that's why I went with that analysis, is just dollars per band per watt and what I'm going to gain. I agree with you on the alligator thing. You don't want to be just blasting out.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to sidetrack, but I do want Tom to tell us a little about his latest amplifier, because I've started my rainy day fund, and I'm hoping to in the very short order acquire one of these. But I even pulled down the operating manual and went through it, and it looks to me like pound for pound, it may be the best value out there. Tom, do you mind just talking about that as a side note?
Yeah, no, not a bit. So for many years, I had an Ameritron AL80A. And as I mentioned, I have a vertical. I have a 43-foot vertical that's remote tuned at the base out by the antenna. So band changes, barefoot are quick. You just change the tuner tunes and away you go. So I was spending a lot of time tweaking those knobs on the old AL80A. I got the KM3KM Mercury 3S. It's a solid state amp. It was much more reasonable than the already built ones. I put it together as a kit. You don't do much soldering. It's really assembly. And boy, it just follows any transceiver and a couple dits, and I'm running full power again. So I think any solid state amp will do that. It was really just a game changer, and I will jump around as the spots come in, and I'll do FT8 on 12, and then see a CW on 15, and I can really make a lot of contacts in a short period of time. DX contacts, it's great.
So it's 1,500 watts, Tom?
It's 1,200 sideband, and then CW and digital is 700.
But I want to make this offer, because I know Loveland's one of the high crime rate areas in the city. So when you go to the East Coast for a few months, if you want me to protect that for you, I'd do that just for you. If you find a need for that. So just
Actually,
let me
Tom,
know.
I'd prefer you didn't tell him and just, that way we can make sure the Loveland crime rate goes up.
Well, it sounds like I need your protection offer, Bill.
All of a sudden, yeah. All right, so we've worked through our first 240, right? So now we're at 241 to number 1. I guess I'm doing it the wrong way, but there's a few in there that Korea and Bouvet and until recently Crozet. Those are, it's going to take a DXpedition to get that, but that whole other tier in there, there's a whole group in there where if you're going to plan to attack that group, I've got a list of things that. And I hate not to look up, but I've got a list of things here and that I would just throw out. And it even gets down to, comfortable headphones and a good headset and a good key so that you can send, and memory keys and do spot research. And the one thing the other thing that the car taught me was, being in the cars, there simply is no substitute for being on the air. Just anomalies in propagation, anomalies, and there's just no substitute. And even things like when you hear a signal come over the pole, if you're on there a lot, it right away because of that watery flutter, where someone else would hear it, they wouldn't really give it a second thought, right? So there's no substitute for that. I also have a contest, announced DXpeditions, QSO parties, learn your station, learn propagation, and listen. So I'm not saying we should take all that at one chunk, but I think it does indicate maybe for the top tier guys, the guys that have made the honor roll, they've honed this. They've done a lot more than just throw the amplifier on and work people, right? So Bert, what comes to mind if you were going to sit with someone and coach them in that final 100, what kind of things they need to think about?
Well, I need somebody to coach me still. I'm just sitting at 281 right now.
Okay.
So I'm at the bottom of that tier. So I'm doing what I do, watching for the DXpeditions and watching the DX spots, and also just getting on the air. Just get on there, call CQ. Lately I've been getting on like 10-meter FT4 in the afternoon, call CQ, and I end up with about 40 JAs in my log, just like that. It's like, wow, I enough of you. I want somebody new, but every now and then somebody new will pop up and actually call, or a good DX station will actually call me, which I really like.
Yeah.
But
So
yeah,
I'm in the,
I got a lot to get going myself here.
you did say something that's interesting, and it's calling CQ, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like going to a lake, and if you don't cast, and then you come home complaining that nothing was biting, right? It's just
you gotta call CQ. I spend many hours a day, mainly on FT8 or FT4, and sometimes that's all 2 hours. Like today, I was for a while, one radio on 10, one radio on 12, and hoping for something new, for a new fish to pop up and bite me.
Okay, Joe, what do you think? We're in that final 100.
Well, you have to be heard. So I'm a big advocate of calling CQ on whatever mode you're on, because if you're not being heard, just like you said, Bill, you're not going to catch the fish. So you have to be heard. One of my tricks, I get Bernie's bulletin, W3UR, and I've been doing this for years. And if there's someone that I need, I make a Post-it note. I need this guy and the time and the frequency that he's supposed to be on, and that helps me. And then if I really need a guy and I just can't get a particular station, I'll send him an email, and I'll say, hey Bert, can you get on the air? You're a new one for me. I'm trying to work DXCC, and can we make a schedule? And that works just about every time for me that I've tried that. So I know a lot of guys maybe don't want to do it or don't believe in doing it, but it works for me.
Okay. Jay?
Well, a lot of things come to mind. I don't know if we touch them or should. QSNs. You mentioned Bernie's newsletter. Look at what people have worked when, and they'll give you an idea of whether you can work that station you need. Another thing is on the equipment. Now you should be looking at, you mentioned headphones or whatever, but a lot of the radios like the K3, you can tailor your audio on your microphone. So, hey, you want a punch, get those highs out there and kill those lows with your equalizer. And if you don't have a equalizer built into the radio, buy one. They're not that expensive. Another thing, I guess, is if you really want to work them, get rid of that Clipperton Albert and get yourself a solid state amp, because while you're waiting for those tubes to warm up, buddy,
Yeah.
he may go QRT on you. So
I got to plug it in too. It's not even plugged in usually.
Oh,
It shares the outlet with the washing machine. If somebody's washing clothes, I'm out of luck.
yeah, well, that's point made then. Yours is even longer to get ready to get to work that really rare one. So another thing, pan adapters. If you don't have a pan adapter built into the radio, now even the newer ones do have that built in, but that's a great tool. I sit there on CW and I'll watch where the guy's pounding, and when the thing pops up, other than the guys are going to call, as Tom mentioned earlier, just keep calling and calling and calling. You can watch where the signal pops up and get over there and see what he's doing, and you can watch it. Not only do you listen, but you can watch and see what the guy's pattern is. And this comes with skill and with time. And I think one of the things we're going to talk about up in this level 3, especially honor roll, is you got to outlive your competition. But with the time thing, you've got to spend the time listening and developing these skills to work the stations. Let's see, I had a couple of other notes. You can also tune your radio with an equalizer, your receiver. And that helps at times. Headsets that have, I think Heil has it where you can phase reverse. I found that helps at times.
Oh, yeah.
Then back to the, well, I guess that's about it for what I've made notes of so far here. But just you start developing other tools, stressing those kinds of capabilities. And if we've mentioned it, but if you haven't started learning other modes, this is a time to get to where you can learn other modes. I remember I didn't get the P5 when the guy was on, because I retired in the December before he got kicked off of North Korea. When I was saying, well, I'll just wait and after I retire. And then he went to RTTY. And by the time I got set up on RTTY, he was kicked out of the country.
Oh.
So make sure you're up on the modes. And again, back to another thing, I'm regressing a bit, but I think Tom mentioned checking the logs and all that. It took me a long time to get Iran and Laos confirmed, because I didn't send my card in right away. And thanks to Fred Lawn, who's now a silent key, he helped me get the card, the initial card for Laos. And then when I've already mentioned it, but when Romeo operated, I guess, a legitimate one from Iran is when I finally got Iran for the first time. So you gotta just be there. You gotta listen. You gotta learn playing all modes. You now have to start looking at different bands. Now might be the time to get down on 160. And even though that's not a band, maybe to get the all-time new one on, it's going to keep you going. So enough on that. Back to you, Bill.
great stuff. Tom?
Yeah, Joe said something that made a big difference to me, and I call it being deliberate. I plateaued about 275 because I was doing the same thing, right? I was waiting for a spot to show up when I had time to sit at the radio. I was in contests, and you just aren't going to work the ones after 275 that way. So I use Bernie's Daily DX as well, and I make notes. I know what I need. I have a list in a couple places in the house, wherever I see read my email. I know what I need, and I'll highlight it or do a post-it note, as Joe said. And like I worked Crozet on like 3 calls on FT8 because, I knew when they were getting on 30 meters and they would be on in the evening and I was there waiting and they popped up and I hit enable and off we went.
Wow.
So it really does make a difference to know what you're looking for and when you should be looking for it, when and where you should be looking for it.
Hey, Tom, can I piggyback on you on that one?
Yeah.
For Crozet, I was listening to him and I'm watching on FT8 on 30 meters, and he just sent out a little blurb that said QSY 20. So I popped over. I knew what frequency he's working CW on 20. I popped over there, gave him enough time to tune. I called him and he came right back to me. I was the first one to hit him on 20 meters. Again, listen, pay attention to what they're doing.
Yep. And there were probably a whole bunch of people still on 30 meters hammering away, right?
Oh, there were. There were.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Isn't that crazy?
I do think the equipment makes a difference. When I got a radio with 2 receivers and 2 pan adapters, as I told Bill one day, I've got 2 eyes and 2 ears. I might as well use them. It really does make a difference. And yes, I owe you an article about that, but I do think it makes a difference.
I didn't have a pan adapter until last September a year, and I don't know how it is. It's so much nicer now, Yeah, Joe, go ahead.
Have you guys heard of a DXpedition? They're always going 5 to 10 up, listening 5 to 10 up. And somebody told me the other day to go down and call. And I have never done that.
I'll tell you who told me that was oh my goodness, he's a silent key. Wayne
McKenzie.
Wayne McKenzie. Do you remember we met out at somebody's house? We were kicking around the idea of having a DX like class or something. You remember that?
Yeah.
Anyway, and he said that there are some DXpeditions where the guy will call, but then he'll listen down because that's where the guys back home are calling.
Yep.
Yes. And when I've been out on my trips, I would go 5 to 10 up, but then I would a lot of times listen 12 up. So my trick has always been get out of that pile up and get up in the open, because sooner or later that operator is going to get tired and he's going to mosey up to get away from that crowd. But,
So, well, let me ask you, since you guys have been on over 60 DXpeditions, each of you, you've both been on several DXpeditions of the year and, major stuff in heat and ice and blown tents and all sorts of things. From your perspective, what do we need to do to get to work you while you're there? Because I can't imagine that wall of sound. I can't imagine what that's like. So what do we need to do to get your attention while you're sitting in the South Sandwich or on Wake or someplace?
I think that you need to spread out, get out of that crowd so that the operator can hear you. I think that's important, because if you can't be heard, you can't be worked. And I personally, I just don't like those big pileups like that. What do you think, Jay?
Well, you hit it. You got to be heard. The DXA guys got to hear you. And you want to be where he's listening or where he's going to be. So again, this is back to the listen. Learn what that operator is doing. And it sort of piggybacks with what you were just asking, Bill. Some guys will listen down. Some guys they have channels, if you will. They'll always go, like if it's on sideband, they'll always hit 3, 3, 3, 3, and then drop back or whatever. I could tell you some operators on DXpeditions who the operator is by listening to them, and it's either their fist or the mode in which they're going. I can tell you who that operator is, and I can be where he's going to be, or where he's going to be listening. So you've got to learn those kinds of tricks. And you're right. Some guys will listen down for the buddies back home, and when they're going to do it. Maybe it's on the hour.
Yeah.
Maybe it's every 5 minutes. I would never do it like that, but I would probably go, hey, if it's me, listen for me at such and such a frequency, call me on such and such a frequency on the 15-minute. And I don't do that steadily, but if like Joe says, if you know a person and you told them ahead of time, hey, I really need that one, I'll do that. Even
Jay,
for Joe.
Jay is so right about listening, because years ago when Scarborough was on, I was hammering away trying to work him, wasn't doing any good. We was on the phone, and the operator was James Brooks. And all of a sudden, just right out of the clear, he said, we was on 20 meters, and he just said 257. And he's down at 14,200. And I thought, man, that is strange. So immediately I went up to 257, made one call, and worked that guy.
I've done that before, Joe, too. I've given a frequency and gone right there.
Yeah. And so Jay is just so right about listening.
So I gotta listen the whole time? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, then that way we can
You
get
got 2 ears and 1 mouth, Bill.
mean, Yeah, but it's 4:30 in the morning. I mean,
2 ears and 1 mouth.
so as we think, now we're in that honor roll, right? We're in that top group. There was a meme that was sent around today, and it was the guy from The Office, and he says, you all can take my messages. There's rare DX on, and he's heading out the office door, you know. But you start to feel like that top 10 or 15, that's almost the approach you have to take, right? You got to get blue flu, or you got to do something to where you're in front of the radio. And what I always worry about as a small pistol or a little pistol is, I don't think I can compete on day one, but if I wait till day 6 and there's a solar flare, dude, I'm out of luck. So you almost have to just get in there every day, hammer and tongs, and beat at it, you know? So Tom, what do you think?
I have to say, I save my energy up. I don't chase them on day 1 or 2 of the DXpedition, or, you know, the first evening of a DX contest. I'll go spend time with the XYL. But you're right. On a short DXpedition, you don't want to be blocked out. You know, one of the things I got from Bob Loker's book a long time ago was, if you're going to work DX all the way up to honor roll, you have to have a station that's on the air 365 days a year. And that's one of the places where DXing differs from contesting. You know, you can't have the beam that's huge but frozen in one direction, because you're going to have to go up and work on it before the contest. So make sure your station will work every day, because you can work the DX. The other part that Jay hit on is you have to stay healthy. You know, the people standing up and who have worked 350 countries over their lifetime are standing up because they did it over their lifetime. So have some healthy habits, and ham radio is a hobby. So do what you can to make sure you're in the seat for decades, not a shooting star or a meteor shower that only lasts a short period of time.
Yep. Bert, what do you think?
Yeah, the listening. Just 1 second here.
He's about to work Bouvet, watch. Oh,
He's gonna come back and go, yay!
Show us how it's done.
No,
Turn that amplifier on, Bill.
no,
he's got to get through spin cycle, Joe, then we'll do it.
the amplifier is not plugged in right now. It's just sitting there gathering dust at the moment. But no, I agree on the listening. And you know, the beginning of a DXpedition like Beauvais now, other than on FT8, I stand absolutely no chance of working them yet. But on FT8, I got a real good chance of doing it because I'm pretty good. I've got, on Joe Taylor modes, I've got like 60,000 cues. So I'm pretty good at FT8. I'm figuring out FT8, where to be and what to do. And we're on CW, that listening, you know, I try and listen to get their pattern, but I'm just not good enough where if you give me 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe 20 CW signals all coming in at once, I just turn the dial. So I'm terrible. I have to wait till the high-ups go down before I can work them on CW, because then I can learn the pattern more when there aren't all them stations calling and then all the frequency cops interrupting my receiver.
But you know what? It's frustrating to me about FT8, whether you like it or not. If you look at the technology behind it, I mean, Joe Taylor's not some chump that just came up with something in his basement, you know? I mean, the technology behind that and what it achieves is just terrific. And I remembered at Sedco this year, there was a guy who came into the shack there that they have at Sedco, and he was just, oh, FT8 this and FT8 that. And I said, hey, I'm just not to eavesdrop on you guys, but let's pretend Bouvet makes it. And right before they get there, the two big containers that have all of the keys and microphones go into the drink, and all they can operate is FT8. And the guy says, then I wouldn't work them. I said, you are so lying. I can't believe it.
If it wasn't for FT8, like last year, I added 13 countries in an FT8 just since June. Between then and now, I've added 13 countries on FT8 that I didn't have before. So it's really helped the little peanut whistle. And to begin with, I was one of the first guys to start doing the JT65 and all that. All the guys at the Twin City DX Association to begin with, when I would go to their meetings and tell them, hey, I work so-and-so on this mode and so-and-so, they'd laugh at me. They'd say, that's not ham radio. Now, guess what? They're all there making it hard for me to get through. They're running their beams and their amplifiers, and by 99.999% of my FT8 or FT4 contacts are running 75 watts or less. And I wish more people get into FT4. That's even better. Once you use FT4 for a couple hours, sitting calling CQ working people on two radios at the same time, then you go back to FT8. Why you say, oh man, this is like watching paint dry. And I can't remember that I can't even imagine JT65 anymore. That I don't think I would have time for anymore at all.
So Bert, I'll make this offer to you. If you want to rescind your position with Twin Cities and join Swadexa, I'll give you credit for whatever you have left. and we won't say a word. So
no, they all followed me.
Okay.
And most of them, the first time they got on FT8, they made sure they worked me first because I was supposed to be the gatekeeper.
Our first podcast that Bill put on, that AA7E, is that correct?
AA7V, Ned Stearns?
Yeah.
Or A7A, I'm sorry.
Yeah, AA7A. And of course, I didn't know the gentleman. He was new to me like you are, Bert. And so we're going along and Bill's asking questions. And to my surprise, I was just shocked. But this guy is involved with Joe Taylor. And this Ned that we had on the podcast is the guy that designed the Fox and Hounds. And he named it Fox and Hounds. So it's just so interesting to me to be part of these podcasts because of the people that we meet on here.
But Fox and Hounds can be very dangerous if you're trying to work them and you got your amplifier on and you quit transmitting and you've been calling them and you leave the room and they call you away, your radio and your amplifier are going to fire up on you. And you're going to come back and
solid
say, what?
State amp, solid state amp.
The first time that happened to me, I had to go to the bathroom. So I quit transmitting, went to the bathroom. I come back and I see that I just worked them. And I say, oh, okay.
Yeah.
How'd that work? How'd that happen? I wasn't transmitting. So yeah, it took a minute to figure out that, hey, they make your transmitter come back alive.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
we've kind of gone over my list. So let's take a minute and I'll just kind of hit you one last time about what have I forgotten or what do you think is most important? For me personally, just to give you a time to think about it, to me, it's listening and it's like I've gone from an HW101 up and through the TS 940 to a Flex 6400. But every time I know if I didn't listen, I didn't follow directions, I wouldn't have had his, and that doesn't mean I still don't transmit on his frequency by accident, do these other things, but I've heard enough times where you'll hear him switch and say, okay, we're going, we're going up 20 and everyone stays right there at 5 and calls and calls and calls. So to me, the big thing has always been listening. And I think my wife would agree with me that that's my biggest challenge when I'm on the air. So Joe, you have any follow-up thoughts?
Yes, of course, being a big, like Bert being a big FT8 guy now, I like to call, let's say at 500 hertz and I'll put out 2 or 3 calls to the station and I don't get him. And then I'll move up to, let's say, 2,500 hertz and call. And so I just don't sit in one particular spot forever. I move around because I don't know what he's hearing. If he's close to Japan, the whole band might be full of Japanese, but I'm not hearing them. So that's one of my little things that I like to do, is move around rather than sit in one spot.
Okay, Tom?
Yeah, one of the things I've been using lately is PSK Reporter, not only to see where I'm heard, but to see where the DX station is being heard. And I think that helps a lot, just my general knowledge and learning and how's propagation working today. The other thing I would add is approach it in a way that's fun for you. There's been times with, kids and work and everything else where I couldn't, jump in with both feet. But I did what I could. And then now I'm fortunate I'm retired and I can get up at 4:30 in the morning and work them and then go take a nap later, as Bert said. So do it in whatever way fits your lifestyle and is fun for you.
Okay, Jay?
Well, what I would add for somebody might be to get up into that top tier, you really need to start learning techniques like calling, holding a half a beat before you call. Some people might disagree with me on this one, but maybe rocking your VFO a little bit on CW. You got to be a little bit different than the other people are. Now I've only rocked my VFO once or twice, but you all remember, well, maybe some of you aren't old enough. I think, well, I guess all of you are. Working the Eastern Europeans, their CW tones, you always knew right away, hey, that's out of Eastern Europe. I'm not saying put AC hum on your signal, but you've got to start learning techniques, calling just a half a beat off. Some of the others, again, the rhythm of the calls, when to call, maybe calling. Normally you should only call once, like on CW or on phone, but maybe calling twice, once or twice will do it. Don't keep calling. We've already mentioned that. Don't keep calling and calling and calling, but just hit your call twice maybe. These different kinds of techniques you got to learn in order to really punch through there. And we've already talked about punching with the equalizers on your microphone, etc. So again, learn the techniques, learn the technical capabilities. And something else that's helped me in this that I'd never really thought about before, especially after we got packet cluster versus calling each other on the telephone or the 2-meter
Repeater.
to let people know what was on, was I used to put my packet cluster and limit my spots only to the US, somebody spotting to the US.
Yes.
Well, I learned, hey, get over there and see what's being spotted from Europe and what's being spotted from Far East. And again, learning your propagation and say, oh, I should be able to probably hear that guy in about an hour and a half. So again, learn the techniques of when to do what.
There's a lot of good, you mentioned Bob Locker's book, and he's got a lot of good hints like that, where he would track certain things and say, okay, I know this guy always, will work 2 and then jump up 10 and then come back. And it's just a great book. And again, I'll put a link in the show notes, but boy, there's just all kinds of good stuff in there that you can learn. So Bert, what's your takeaway here?
Yeah, it's listen, and hone your operating skills and use all the tools out there. Like on FT8, I use JT Alert, and that tells me that the guy does logbook of the world. If they don't do logbook of the world, a lot of times I don't even try and work them, unless I look them up on QRZ, another place, and it says that they do logbook of the world, but yet JT Alert don't say it, or it says in there you can use club log to get a QSL from them. So yeah, use all your tools, listen, and learn the gray line, learn the operating procedures, and go out and have fun. Like it's just do what you're like you said, what you're comfortable with. Like I'm comfortable sitting here spending 3 or 4 hours at a time, if the bands are wide open, like 10 and 12 lately, playing on FT8 or FT4. Anyway, just, and you do it like I got a Korean station just before I got on here on their, called me on there, South Korea, of course. And I haven't worked very many of them like I have the JAs. Anyway, so yeah, just get on.
You know, Karen and I kind of have some fun because the one I've been after for years is Vietnam, and that's another. I worked an individual there who turned out didn't get credit for being there, so it didn't count. And since then, I've not worked him since. So recently, there's been a lot of Vietnam on, and we'll be up watching one of our favorite British shows or something, and you know, I get the spots on my phone. I'll look at it and I'll look at her, and she says, Vietnam, I'll put it on pause. So off we go. So what I'm trying to do, of course, with the podcast also is just, and we'll wrap up here and give folks who maybe are still trying to find out what this DX stuff is all about, a sense of excitement. So we kind of finish every podcast just by asking each one of you, and I'll go clockwise on the screen here. Joe, if you'll start us off. What is just exciting to you about DX?
I guess trying to work some guy in Japan or East Malaysia, and when you talk to him or do FT8, that instant he is picking that up, and that has just always intrigued me. And I just absolutely, I've been a DXer all my life, and I just can't get away from it. I'm in here every day, but I mean, I'll work US stations. Anybody calls me, obviously I'm going to work, but my focus is always on that 340 or the ones that I need for band fills. And I really like reaching out, like Beauvais, for example. Now I'll wait a couple of days and let everything settle down before I get in there. But I've got them on 2 bands from other D expeditions. So that's sort of what I like to do, Bill.
Okay, Jay, what do you think? What gets you excited about chasing these countries and entities?
I may be taking a different approach than a lot of other folks, but to me, it's still magic. You know, I turn that radio on and I press the key, and some guy on the antipode from here can hear me. And sure, the exchange is only an FN, 5NN by kind of an exchange, but it's still, that magic's there. And what also got me or keeps me going, not so much anymore since I think I know a fair amount about the countries, but initially was, gee, I'm talking to Cameroon. What kind of government do they have? What are these people like over there? And of course, in the early days, if you were talking to someplace in Africa, it probably wasn't an African you were talking to. It was probably a Frenchman or a Brit that's there on some sort of an assignment, but it's still learning about the country, learning what they're doing. So it's the history, it's the culture, kinds of things. You know, what's that show, The Great Race or something like that, where they send people all around the world doing?
Yeah, The Amazing Race.
Amazing Race.
Yeah.
You know, I always felt like, you know, I could be on The Amazing Race, and any country I went to, I could get a hold of somebody to help me, because I've talked to that country, and in many of them, I'm good friends with somebody there. I mean, especially in Western Europe, when I was working in and out of there and playing games around Europe. You know, I could go to any country in Western Europe, I think, and find some ham that I've talked to that would help me, especially if I lost on The Amazing Race all that money or whatever it is and had to beg on the street. So it's just the friendship, the fellowship. That's what keeps me going in it. And then another part of it is something like this, Bill, where you help other people come to a different appreciation of the hobby. And just helping somebody out. You know, this hobby, I got started when I was 14 or something like that. This is carried over for me. I went in the Marine Corps. I became an aviation electronics technician as an enlisted guy. I was in electronic countermeasures as a commissioned officer. So electronics in some form or fashion has been part of my life, and it's just built. So it's been great for me. The whole hobby has. I remember the first QSO talking from Memphis to Kennett, Missouri, with a 5-watt rig input maybe. And it was just, golly, wow, I talked to somebody all the way up there in Missouri. And now that all the way up there in Missouri is all the way over there in Crozet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you remember the mystique when there was an Iron Curtain and you would work
Yes.
somebody behind the Iron Curtain and then you'd get a card from Box 88 in Moscow? I can remember going to high school and people didn't believe you. It's like, no, I talked to this guy last night and his name was always Vlad or Yuri or
Yeah.
something. But you know, that was
Let me give you a
unheard of.
different one on that one. When I was going for my top secret clearance, they said, have you had any contacts with people in the Soviet Union? Oh, yeah. How often? Oh, almost every night. What? They made me go through my logbook and put down for them every contact I had, how long it was, and if I could remember what we talked about.
Wow.
Before they'd issue my TS.
Wow. Pretty interesting. So Tom, what gets you excited about this?
Well, it's certainly the magic of radio. The fact that I can assemble a station and put up antennas and I can be heard across on the other side of the world and I can hear them back. That still practically gives me chills when it happens. It's just amazing. It's also the friendship. I had, before the Iron Curtain fell, I had the chance to be in Budapest. And I actually met, I think it was HA8AA, who I had a couple of QSOs with. And I actually met him in downtown Budapest. That was pretty amazing. It's the friendship and the learning too. I mean, I couldn't have talked to that many countries when I first got it started. So I think it's probably made me better. And the last thing I would say is I find my friends to be incredibly geographically challenged. In terms of world geography, I can beat them all in any trivia game that they want to come up with. So they all want me on their side when it's time to name the country.
You know, there was one on Jeopardy a few months ago, and I thought of Jay because it was the Roaring 40s. That was the answer. And isn't that the section of the ocean down around where you were at on
I think it's the
Sandwich?
Roaring 60s, but
60s.
maybe it is the 40s, but yeah, it's basically the strait between Antarctica and South America.
And there's no possible way I'd have known that if I hadn't seen your DXpedition video, you know. So Bert, what would either get you excited or what would you tell someone?
Well, I have to agree with the other guys. It's the magic. I got these you can't even see my antennas. You don't even know there's a ham operator that lives here where I'm at. And my antennas are all hidden in the brush, which they have to be because I'm not supposed to have any antennas. But yet I got 4 antennas. I got a whole antenna farm out there hiding in the brush. And that I can take them antennas and my radio and I can work people across the whole world is just so amazing. You know, you can do it on the internet. So what? There's no challenge. There's a challenge to doing it with your own radio and your own antennas, no matter how lousy they are. Or I call my antennas wet noodles, except for I do have an HF2V butternut, which is a decent 40 and 80. And I got the 160 coil on it. And now I'm up to 68 countries. That's my band I need to get going on is 160. Anyway, it's the fun of the challenge of I put this together and this is what it can do.
Great. Well, listen, I appreciate you guys taking your personal time.
Can we get Joe's opinion?
I did, didn't I?
Me? Yeah, you had. I was first.
Oh, okay. You're always first, Joe.
Boy, wasn't that interesting? I really enjoyed that episode and had a lot of fun with those guys. I hope you enjoyed it as well. Thank you for joining us on the DX Mentor podcast. I would also like to thank our excellent guests, Joe, WAGEX, Jay, K4ZLE, Tom, NR8Z, and Bert, WB0N. They really had a lot to contribute. I'm sure you learned a lot. I would love to have your feedback, answer your questions, and provide help with any DX or ham radio question you may have. just feel to drop me a line at thedxmentor@gmail.com, or you can give me a call at 513-855-3980. If you're into Twitter, I'd love to have you follow me at thedxmentor. That would be great. You can always DM me with something. Each episode can also be listened in podcast form from your favorite podcast platform. Again, just search on The DX Mentor. An episode list and more details can be found at ajab.com/the-dx-mentor-podcast. Please drop me a line if you've achieved an all-time new one, received recognition, or have a DX event that you'd like me to mention during one of our shows. I'd be happy to do that. So 7 threes for this episode, and thanks to my XYL for her love and support.